Director Anderson. Director Buchanan.
Here.
Director Colson.
Here.
Director DeWitt.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Here.
Director Troiani. Director McAllis.
Here.
Director Anderson.
Here.
We have a quorum of 7 present with no absent. If the record would also show that Directors Durante, Frega, Fuentes, Melvin, Pang, Ross, Totten, and Chairman Dillard are also present.
Thank you. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes from May 21, 2015. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes? If not, could we have a motion and a second? Motion by Member DeWitt, second by Director Buchanan. Roll call.
Director Anderson.
Yes.
Director Buchanan.
Yes.
Director Colson.
Yes.
Director DeWitt.
Yes.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Troiani. Where'd he go? Director McAllis.
Aye.
We have a quorum of, what did I just say? 6 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Item number 3A is a semi-annual report on project management oversight. B.
Good morning. So the project management report is done semi-annually. Jim Hickey will be presenting the status on the various projects, working very closely with the service boards and their project management staff and operations staff. We determine the status on the various projects. You'll get information about the total budget, what's been expended, what or any issues have come up impacting possibly schedule. There are some projects that are behind schedule. Jim will speak to that. So, Jim?
Thank you, V. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. Today I'm happy to present the current report on project management oversight. We last published this report in December 2014. It is a semi-annual report. You received the PMO report as part of your board briefing and includes details for every project. The report was designed to make it straightforward for our board to easily see progress, issues, and risks for transit capital projects in the region. The program currently includes oversight of all state-funded projects, regardless of budget, and all projects with budgets of $10 million or more, regardless of funding source. Together, this set for this reporting period represents $4.01 billion. As a bit of background, RTA implements PMO pursuant to Section 2.01b of the RTA Act. RTA is required to oversee the Service Board's capital programs and expenditures, and PMO is a part of RTA's fulfillment of this requirement. Specific involvement includes direct reports and meetings from Service Board project teams, attendance at other project meetings, site visits, and periodic reporting to the Illinois Department of Transportation. As of the current reporting period, 89% of the state-funded projects are on budget. 1 project is under budget, and 2 projects are over budget. Service boards have requested budget revisions to add funding for these 2 projects. Specific details are included in the PMO report. As to schedule, 60% of the projects remain on schedule with 1 ahead. The remaining 10 are behind schedule for various reasons, most of which are behind the project outside the project team's control, such as weather issues, operational constraints, utility conflicts. Some of these have led to some change orders. 4 of the current projects have change orders executed. That's a typo. 96% of extra costs has been for added value, with 1.177 reduction for value engineering options. None, notably, for errors and omissions. Selected project highlights include CTA's Ravenswood Loop track renewal, which is currently ahead of schedule. This project will replace track components between Merchandise Mart and Armitage stations on the brown-purple lines, eliminating over 2.5 miles of slow zone. As for Metra, it is about on par with its peer agencies nationwide in implementation of positive train control. Although an extension to the December 2015 deadline will be necessary for nearly all railroads in the United States, Metra has nonetheless made considerable progress. Finally, PACE has continued its rolling stock procurements, moving forward with the purchase of 84 paratransit vehicles. Previous projects of this sort have finished under budget, and this may again be the case when this current procurement is substantially complete. This concludes my presentation, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Questions or comments by the members? Yes, Director Lewis.
Is there any way of looking at the... Oh, sorry. I thought Mike is my name, or Mike is going to use that? Is there any way of looking at the total spend? You said there's $4 billion. Do we have a breakdown of that spend by firm or entity, and how much of that happened to go to DBEs or MBEs? Is that information available?
That's not something that we've typically tracked in terms of which vendors are going with. We know them. We don't really include that in the report. We don't report on it. If you'd like some of those details, we can seek that out and follow up potentially.
It would be helpful to see over maybe a 3-year period to see how those funds were spent, if it was the same firms or if there was a change in that. That would be information that might be useful, particularly as we monitor and track some of the spending for some of our DBE, MBE components. So if that would be something to be readily available, it would be interesting to see.
Director Lewis, that information we can request it from the service boards. We do not have that information. They, of course, track, at length their prime contracts, their subcontractors, their spend down. So they would have all that information, but we could request that.
Yeah, I think it'd be good if we requested it from them so we could see that information. So that'd be great if we could do that.
Okay.
Second point that I want to make, and the final one, is that I know with the expanded mandate on the audit committee for compliance and really making sure there was efficiency, we probably need to harmonize the two concepts, because if you look at the notes from the minutes from last month's meeting, Michael talked about the expanded mandate for the audit committee. Many of those items kind of dovetail with what this particular report does. So I would just make a point that we should make sure we are not being redundant, and we look at the two mandates and make sure we're not overlapping.
Agreed. Thank you.
It was my understanding that the contract compliance initiative is internal RTA contracts. This is a whole separate service board contract. These contracts are not part of that. So I just wanted to clarify that. Nadine may be able to speak to it better.
That pretty much covers it. The contract compliance management report that we're going to be giving to the board.
Mike,
Yes?
Not working.
Oh,
we need to turn some off.
sorry.
Okay.
I think over time we should progress towards that, so that would be very helpful. Thank you.
In fact, just to follow up on that comment, Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to really think about whether or not we ought to have or develop some type of policy that we at least start to gauge and understand, and maybe even set some expectations of how we want to behave in this whole area. And as well as having some ongoing reporting that we have, and I would say system-wide, not just the RTA, but all the service boards and the like, and have some formal policy about how we want to think about this, how we want to behave around this, how we want to report it, how we want to monitor it.
Any other comments? If not, how did this compare with the last quarterly report? It seemed to me like the last time we had much more achievement as far as projects on time and higher percentages and so forth. Is there any look back on where this put us this reporting period versus the last?
Yeah, we had a little bit more slipping with baselines. We didn't have any projects over budget 6 months ago. And I believe we had 6 behind schedule, whereas this time it's 10. I think the service boards my assessment is that the service boards are recognizing that if there's one baseline you're going to allow to slip, schedule should be it, given the budget situation that they have and their date of good repair backlog. So that's my assessment of what I've seen.
With what's going on the federal and state level as far as funding, eventually that's going to impact a lot of projects. The state talking about capital funding pullback, may not affect these, but certainly our next reporting period. How does that maybe be? How does that
One of the things that we were cognizant of, this report reflects a snapshot in time, and within those detailed explanations, those sheets on each of the projects will explain, of course, the total budget, the state funded portion, as well as impact on schedule and impact on budget. But again, this report reflects what was going on in the last few weeks. We have since learned, and Leanne will speak to that more during her executive report, but we do know that there will be a suspension in state capital monies. So many of these projects will be affected by the suspension. We're not talking about, not meeting the commitments, but suspension. And we're working with IDOT. So Leon will speak to that more. But you're right, anything that has any state-funded capital grant component is affected. Plus earlier you saw when we had the audit report how state grant funding has decreased. They have not issued the bonds. So that continues to be a concern, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later.
No, yes, Director Frega.
I want to comment that I'm kind of pleased with the 86% zero change orders. My comment would be, though, we have $20 million worth of change orders. What percentage is that of the work?
Jim, you want to speak to that? If you don't have the exact percentage, then at least speak to what those change orders were, because I think you have that detail.
Yeah, for that 20 million in added value, the bulk of that was on Metro's Highliner procurement, the 160 Highliners. That was a change order that went out to add PTC capability to those cars. So they're being delivered with a lot of the onboard work already installed, which would be a little bit less expensive than a subsequent retrofit because you get to take care of it right at the manufacturer. So that's the bulk of that 20 million. So as soon as that procurement's complete, you'll see that number go down.
How much is the work? How much is the work that is underway? Would be my question. The 20%, the $20 million is what percentage of the work that's underway?
For that particular project, it would be, off the top of my head, the PTC change order was for about 16 out of 585 million. So whatever that math would come out to would be the percentage change order for that.
Thank you.
Director Buchanan.
Yeah, to build on Mr. Lewis's request and Mr. Anderson's, I would also like to throw in how many of these businesses are actually Illinois businesses. People working in Illinois and spending their money in Illinois should be favored also. So I'd like to have that thrown in there also. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, thank you, B. We'll move on to item 3A or 3B, and that's the report on the monthly financial results for April 2015.
Okay, we will now review the financial results for the year-to-date through April. Favorable expense performance is more than offsetting unfavorable operating revenue, producing an improving net result for the system. However, ridership continues to be an area of concern. For the third straight month, labor data indicates that employment levels decreased in the RTA region, with 6,000 fewer jobs in the Chicago area in April. This resulted in an increase in the local unemployment rate to 6.4, lagging both the broader Illinois rate and the national rate, which dropped to 5.4%. Now look at system ridership. In April, it was down 2% from prior year, and year-to-date system ridership is now 2.3% lower than budget. As indicated by the red box, PACE suburban ridership is 10% unfavorable to budget through April. PACE's budget anticipate a 1.4% ridership growth for 2015, but in fact, PACE has experienced ridership losses in the three of the first 4 months of the year. PACE attributes the lower ridership to severe weather conditions, lower gas prices, and the discontinuation of cash transfers from last July. When you look at operating revenue, it was 1.5% unfavorable to budget. But I want to take a moment to explain a little bit what's going on here with the state reduced fare reimbursement. State fare reimbursement is supposed to be at $34 million. We had programmed the $34 million in for this current year. Unfortunately, we know we're not going to receive $17.5 million, and we may not even receive the other $17.5 million. So at this point, the service boards, who always include that revenue as a credit within their recovery ratios and income, are no longer doing that. So you're going to see the fare revenue continue to decrease, which will impact not only the ratios, the recovery ratios, but also what that revenue shows up on here. At this point, though, until we know more about the status of the funding, they're not going to report the accruals and the financial results, which I think is a more accurate way of reporting what's going on with that revenue. If this funding is significantly reduced, the revenue recovery ratio could be reduced by more than a full percentage point, all else being equal. So we're carefully monitoring the recovery ratio because a 50% requirement is in the RTA Act. Pace Suburban Service has highlighted unfavorable variance of 4.2% with lower than anticipated advertising revenue and reduced fair funding. PACE received an influx of Medicaid reimbursements in April, so it's increasing the operating revenue variance for ADA paratransit to an 11.4 favorable, which is highlighted in blue. But again, that's a timing thing. The Medicaid payments come in for prior years even, so it's just when they arrive. The public funding section of the dashboard displays results that are very close to budget. Last week, we received the March sales tax, which again is never late. There's a lag in when the taxpayer pays the tax and when the tax is remitted to the state and then remitted to the RTA, but it is not late. We received that directly. But it did increase 4.7% from prior year. Since March was our first month of the year with more or less normal weather, it's a clear indication of the sales tax continuing to grow. And so it's a strong growth of 4% again this year. And our various forecasting sources, including our customized forecasting source, reflect this. System-wide operating expenses through April were $18 million, or 2.1% favorable to budget, with each service board reporting favorable results. As we reported last month, about 1/3 of this favorable variance is attributable to the lower fuel prices. Pace Suburban Service had a 9% favorable to budget performance, highlighted in blue, driven primarily by the fuel savings. And ADA Paratransit's 9.2 favorable expense performance is being driven by lower purchase transportation, fuel, and administrative expense. When you look at the regional level, favorable operating expenses more than offset the unfavorable operating revenue, producing a year-to-date net result that was $13.8 million favorable to budget, or a $5 million improvement over last month's report. Pace Suburban and ADA Paratransit again have favorable net results, highlighted in blue, again due to their expense performance. So looking at the regional system-generated recovery ratio, it was 48.5%, unfavorable to budget by 0.3 percentage points. So in the absence of any revenue or expense credits, the system-generated revenue recovery ratio for the region would be 40.5, so it's up slightly better from last month, again due to expense performance and reductions. So we'll continue to monitor and report on any developments, with the state funding situation. That concludes my remarks, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bea. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Director Duran.
Bea, why do we have a continuing drop in ridership? We've spent money on advertisements, contracts for advertising, using the system, surveys, etc. Had we not done that, our ridership would be extremely poor. What is it? Just you're saying unemployment is the reason for the ridership drop?
As I presented, I think at the quarterly report, it seemed bus ridership decrease is a national trend. And I actually presented our peers in one of our reports that showed they were decreasing by more than us, with one exception. I can't think of what the exception was. But so bus ridership is down throughout the country, a trend. I think it does take a while for marketing programs to work, and certainly that's something that we may see down the line. You do have to wonder what would happen if we weren't during those marketing initiatives. We continue to work with PACE, where we've seen the more significant ridership decrease. And they are telling us that it's fuel prices, as gas prices go down, the elimination of their cash transfer. But I don't have, explanation really. We're continuing to monitoring it. And there's also the weather-related issues, which are still, remember, I'm reporting on the month of April. So that still was a trend. So we're continuing to monitor it, but I'm afraid I don't have a better answer.
Director Totten?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you show the comparison of the last time gas prices were at this level as to where ridership was going?
We did do an elasticity study. I'll have to pull that and show how that was impacted at the time.
Do you
We can submit it to the board as a follow-up.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? If not, thank you, B.
Thank you.
Next item is item 4, which is an ordinance amending the 2015 capital program amendment for the second quarter, B.
Beth McCluskey, our manager in the capital programming and financing area, she will be presenting this report.
Good morning. The proposed ordinance addresses changes to the RTA capital program. The memo you received, is it not on? Sorry. That's close. Okay. Sorry. Good morning. The proposed ordinance addresses changes to the RTA capital program. The memo you received provides additional background and delineates specific program changes. This table shows capital revenue or funding source changes included in the ordinance this quarter. Overall, these changes sum to a total program increase of $37.3 million. Service Board funds increased through CTA insurance settlement proceeds, CTA TIF funds, and PACE positive budget variance, for a total of $34.1 million. Deobligated and carryover funds have increased by $3.1 million to reflect the carryover of prior programmed ICE funds for CTA at $3.1 million. Again, an increase of $37.3 million, bringing the total capital program to nearly $1.19 billion. This table summarizes the proposed program changes per service board on the uses of funds. CTA is increasing at $35.3 million. Metra is doing a financially neutral fund source change to be addressed in upcoming slides, and PACE is increasing by $2 million. Again, an increase of $37.3 million, which will be reported on by project additions next. The CTA has proposed to add 2 new projects to their 2015 capital program. The first are improvements at the Grand and Jefferson Park stations on the Blue Line. This is a component of the Your New Blue initiative. You can see on the slide the artist renderings. The second is an update to the Material Management Information System, MIMS, and the EAM project, which are high priority needs that Kevin Stanzio just presented. The CTA has also proposed several budget revisions, including a significant one for additional funding proposed for repairs to the North Main Line branch of the Red Line. Metra has proposed 2 budget revisions to their 2015 capital program that are financially neutral in nature, and you can see on the slide the 5307 funding is decreasing while the 5337 funding is increasing. These fund source changes will be applied to the Metra Positive Train Control project. PACE has requested to add 1 new project for $2 million. This project is a component of the South Division CNG facility construction. Positive budget variance funds will allow the completion and contingency funding for this project. Finally, in addition to 2015 capital program revisions, we request approval of State of Illinois funded changes that have been programmed between 2010 and 2014. We are requesting that these projects, as proposed, move forward at such time as State of Illinois funds become available for expenditure. These include, as seen on the slide, CTA's Peoria Street Station. This transfer of funding will allow for IDOT Highway Department to provide coordinated project management at this joint highway and transit site, which is also a component of the Your New Blue initiative. CTA 95th Street, unspent funds from the Dan Ryan Red Line Track project are proposed to be reprogrammed to the 95th Street Terminal project. And Metra, Healy Station, additional funding is necessary to meet acceptable bids for construction, and unspent funding from completed projects will be applied here. Again, as funds become available, we propose that these projects move forward. Staff requests that the Finance Committee recommend board approval at this time, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? These projects have all been through their boards, both the CTA, Metro, and PACE. Any other? Yes, Director Melvin.
On the Metro side, you see that something's being defunded and something's being funded. What's being defunded, or what's the?
No, it's a neutral fund source change. That Section 5307 funding, in April, we brought to the board, the Federal Register had published different funding appropriations that the service boards had to then rebalance their programs. So Section 5307 is increasing and Section 5337 is decreasing, but it's financially neutral. It's not really moving the needle at all on the funding for that project.
I mean, it's really more of an estimate that came in the
Yes.
beginning, and now the real monies are flowing, and it's really just coming out of, those numbers are federal pots of money, so it's coming out of one pot, not the other pot. So this is
Gotcha.
more of a housekeeping item here, so the capital program is all above board, money's coming in and out of the right sources, and now we have the real money coming our way, we know what to do with it, and so we're just reallocating it around.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Comments? If not, can we have a motion and a second? Motion by Director Tarani, second by Director Buchanan. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Buchanan,
Yes.
Director Colson,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director DeWitt,
Aye.
Director Troyani,
Yes.
Director McGallis,
Aye.
7 ayes and no absent.
Thank you. Is there any other business to come before the committee? If not, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Director Buchanan, second by Director Lewis. All in favor of adjourning? Motion by aye. Committee is adjourned. Thank you.